I flopped a pair of tens. I don't expect this guy to be making too many moves. I turned two pair. I expect him to have some queens in his range. I don't expect him to fold a queen. I also expect him to have a lot of jacks in his range, and I don't expect him to fold any of those. He could also have, something like king queen or even king nine. So I'm going to be betting pretty big and expect to get called. That's an awful river for me. I do expect him to have a queen some of the time here, and if he has something like ace jack, he now beats me. So I'm never gonna turn my hand into a bluff here. If I check, I don't expect him to be bluffing at me very often. So I'm gonna check and fold if he bets. So that's definitely a good result, and I'm very curious to see what he had, because that's the kind of river that whatever I was beating on the turn, a lot of those hands now beat me. So wow, so like I saw, he's definitely calling their light on the flop a lot. He called with a gut shot, he turned a flush draw, and then he didn't turn his hand into a bluff on the river. So that's pretty much what I was expecting to happen, for him not to really bluff the river, and for him to be calling with a pretty wide range on the turn, and also on the flop, which is why I bet my middle pair. Here, king 10 offsuit. This is a hand that I would be folding a lot of the time if there were two good players in the blinds, because I expect him to be squeezing if I'm calling way too much in position on the button. But I really want this guy to come in. So that's why I call with king 10 offsuit, because I do expect him to be making a ton of mistakes. Jazz X is a regular. I do expect that he picked up on my intentions and also no luck's intentions. I do expect him to be raising pretty light most of the time here. I really want to re-raise him back, but this is kind of the same spot as that king 5 of diamonds hand, and I'm just gonna fold just because I failed twice, and I really don't want to. I don't want to fail again, because I'm building up a pretty good image on this table, and I don't want to completely destroy that by re-raising there and getting shoved off my hand. So I feel like folding there is marginally the better play out of re-raising. Calling can sometimes be an option, I feel, if you're a little deeper. King 10 offsuit is just a hand that does not flop well at all. So I'm going to be missing a ton, and not only that, a lot of the hands that he 3-bets for value, like king queen, ace king, those hands are going to dominate me. And also, if he has an overpair and I hit a pair of tens, it's going to be impossible for me to get away from it if it's top pair, and it's just the hand that does not have very good reverse implied odds, and also on top of that, it doesn't flop very well, so I generally wouldn't call most of the time. That last hand, I'm sorry, I didn't actually pick up on that. No luck instantly limped, and he never limps, so it's 100% a misclick on his part. I should have raised up my 5-6 offsuit, but I was a little distracted in my thought process. And as you can see, it was definitely a misclick. He also had 5-6 offsuit, so I could have taken it down there. Unfortunately, I didn't. So that was a little bit of a misstep on my part. 9-3 suited, awful hand. Just gonna fold it. So I didn't talk about Derek JC. He's a very good regular. He's been around forever, and he's always played extremely well. He adjusts to people well, and not going to get very out of line against him. So 7-6 offsuit is definitely a fold. Actually, I'm tempted to call because I know this guy makes a ton of mistakes. I'm getting somewhat decent odds, but it's just such a weak hand that I'm gonna fold it. I don't really like re-raising this guy. I don't expect him to be folding a lot of hands. And if he calls a re-raise, then I expect that whatever hand he hits on the flop, he's just gonna go along with it. So I'm not gonna have too much fold equity on the flop. Here's 7-8 suited. Great hand to play against this guy. Unfortunately, I am out of position, but something that I can live with against him. Queen Jack offsuit, I don't mind having this hand at all. Last time I had the King 10 off, and it's sort of a similar hand as that. It plays a little better against a 3-bet, but I'm going to play the same way and expect this guy to call a pretty decent amount of the time and expect him to make mistakes post-flop. I'm not sure if Jazz X is going to re-raise again. If he would have, I would have folded again. I don't expect him to be, bluffing the second time around, because it is such a spot where both of us can really have, not too much. And obviously, no luck is in the hand too. He's not going to give him too much credit if he just keeps re-raising in that spot. He bets out at flop middle pair. It's a hand with a few possibilities. I have some backdoor flush draws, and now I did hit that backdoor flush draw. He bets out again. No luck, I find barrels a lot. So this is kind of an interesting spot. I really don't know what range you can have here, but since I did take so long on the flop, I do have a few outs. I don't know if he can have air here or not, but I do expect that he can semi-bluff something like Jack 10, and I think he can bet a few kings as well. So I'm gonna call and hit a straight on the river. So if he bets here again, that's a pretty tough spot for me, because I don't expect him to be bluffing this river at all. I have a lot of queens in my range as well as a few flushes. He checks to me pretty quickly. If I bet here, I don't expect him to really fold a queen, so I can't fold him off a split. And I don't expect him to be calling worse. And I also don't expect that I have too much of a bluffing range here. So it might seem bad, but I'm going to check behind. So like I suspected, he definitely had a semi-bluff range there. He had the 9-10 with the straight draw. So that was one of the hands that I put him on to call the turn with. And I don't expect him to call a river bet with that hand. My hand just looks too strong if I call 2 streets and then bet the river there. And, he's tricky, so he can definitely check raise on the river with a flush, which is why I check behind. So I finally won a pot off him. I'm actually pretty surprised about that. Because usually what would happen is the river would come a queen, and then he would hit a straight. And I'd be like, no, how do you do it? Here I pick up ace-6 suited. It's a pretty good flopping hand. It hits something good decent portion of the time. That's a great flop for me. I expect to bet and take it down a ton of the time against this guy. So I'm just going to bet small, because I don't expect my bet sizing to matter too much against him. And I do take it down, which is, the result that I was expecting most of the time, and definitely a good result. King deuce offsuit, terrible hand, just going to fold under the gun, especially. That's a hand I would definitely consider raising on the button, however, because this guy's in the small blind. But in that spot, it's just a slam dunk fold. Jack 4 suited, I've been pretty active on this table. Had I not been, I would consider 3-betting this hand against these two guys. But since I have been pretty active, I'm just going to fold. No luck, his range from that spot is it's going to be pretty solid, not too out of line. And Jack 4 suited just, I feel like, is not a good hand to have against him in that spot, since he does like to barrel more than one a lot of the time. Jack 9 suited, great hand. If any of these two guys raises, I'm gonna call again, hoping to draw this guy in. So here my calling range can have a lot of things in it. I can definitely have an overpair, hoping that this guy calls as well and bring him along. So on this flop, generally I don't represent too much. So most of the time on this flop, I would just check and give up. But against no luck, in this spot, he knows that I'm going to be calling here with an overpair a lot of the time. So he checks, so he can definitely be checking behind with ace high. And also, I expect him to be checking to give up some. But I feel like I can represent a decently big hand here if I bet the river. You know, I think my hand looks like a pocket pair, and I think both of us know that he has ace high, so I can definitely be betting here as a bluff, but I can also be betting there with, you know, just such a light value range, like any sort of pair. So that's why it puts him in kind of a tough spot. So obviously I'm not going to be betting there 100% of the time, and if that guy wasn't in the blinds, I probably wouldn't even consider betting the turn there. But since both of those were the case, then I chose to bet the turn and then bluff the river. Wow. Yeah. So as you saw, that play was obviously just not very good. No luck raises. This guy re-raises small with ace king, which I do expect him to be raising, re-raising small with stuff like ace king, aces. Not really ever bluffing. Not really ever re-raising 9-7 suited and stuff like that. The flop comes low. He checks, just kind of, you know, showing that he's giving up. No luck checks behind, which I think is a great play with a pair of nines. And then because no luck check behind, he decides that it's a good play to bet the turn and river, which really isn't. No luck puts him on exactly ace king, I feel, and calls off two streets, which is a good play by him. He's a good player. No luck sits out here, which is great news for me. It's one less good player at the table. Yeah. Sometimes fish just sit down and they'll sit down with, like, you know, whatever he sat down with, 1200. They'll just like donk off their stack to 600, and they'll double up in some absurd hand, and then they'll like donk it down to 600 and double up again like in some absurd hand. And I'll just sit there on one table. I'm like, I cannot leave this table, but my session is done. So I'm like watching TV, playing one table, and it'll last like 4 hours just because this guy just keeps rebuilding his roll somehow. So here, this is a very interesting spot. Dr. Giggy raises, Derek 3-bets. I think Dr. Giggy doesn't expect Derek to have too much because, number one, Giggy wants to raise this guy's big blind, and number two, Derek is going to be flatting his big hands a lot of the time just to draw this guy in. So it could be that they both have hands here, or it could just be that they're both full of it. And I don't know, we'll see. It's a pretty big pot. I don't really know what Giggy's range is here. I expected it to be something like, you know, about 25% just absolute nonsense. And then like the rest of it, like ace king or ace queen. Derek, on the other hand, I really have no idea what he has calling that 4-bet. I feel like he could definitely have suited connectors since they are deep. I feel like he could also have an ace there some of the time because they are deep, even a strong ace. So because he checked behind on the turn, I feel like, you know, he probably has an ace or a pocket pair. I don't think he's folding a pocket pair on the flop because, you know, Giggy's range does have some error in it. So Giggy checks again, so that kind of tells us he doesn't really have much. And I do expect JC to be checking behind here. Unless he has aces, which is a hand that he could have. I feel like he could have pocket 7s perhaps. Pocket 10s, I do expect he would have bet that on the turn. I don't know if he bets ace queen here on the river. He would definitely bet ace king. He could check that on the turn, so he could definitely have ace king. Ace Queen, however, I don't expect to him to be betting too much of the time, but I mean that is possible as well. So as you saw there, Gigi did have air, and then Derek had the real hand. So that's a pretty cool spot. You know, it's a huge pot, and it's all due to the mind game and this guy being in the big blind that dynamic went down. So I really don't expect that to have happened had this guy not been in the big blind. Pocket eights here, gonna call. I guess re-raising here is kind of okay because Derek just won a big pot, so I don't expect him to be getting out of line much. But re-raising here really puts me in a tough spot if he 4-bets. Because, you know, it's, again, the same spot as that last hand where I'm not representing much. Because I'm going to be flatting a lot of my big hands as well. Flop is ace, jack, deuce, all diamonds. It's a flop where I expect Derek to be c-betting here most of the time with his air. So I'm actually just going to raise him. I'd be raising here with ace, jack, a set of deuces. I feel like I can have jacks and aces as well just because this guy's in the small blind. And also a flush. So I represent a pretty big value range, and obviously I'm going to be raising air here too. Ace is definitely going to be good some of the time as well, but since I don't even have a diamond, it's a hand that is extremely vulnerable, so I don't want to be calling there. Because not only will I get sucked out on, but I'm going to get outplayed as well a decent portion of the time in later streets. So this guy min raises the button. I'm not really sure what that means. I'm assuming it means a weaker hand because he's been 3xing in other spots, and he also did re-raise to 70 with his ace-king offsuit. So I expect him to be making it probably a little bigger with bigger hands. He min raises again. If I were Jazz X, I would probably re-raise him with any 2 in the spot. I think it's a pretty good choice to re-raise him with a lot of junk on the button if he's in the cutoff, which is the advantage of being in position on him. You know, you get to isolate him, and I mean, he can call or fold. Doesn't matter. If he calls, you're going to be taking it down on the flop a ton of the time too. So it's just extremely plus EV with almost any hand. Hopefully we get to see a showdown here, so we can sort of gauge, you know, what hand he's going to be min raising with in the cutoff there. But unfortunately, Gigi does fold, so we're not going to be able to see that. King Queen offsuit is an excellent hand, but unfortunately he folds. So it's going to be back to playing regularly. Gigi's going to be raising the button with a ton of hands. I'm just going to 3-bet him here because he's going to have so many hands that he can't call a re-raise with. And even if he does call me, he can't really... well, even if he does call me, sorry, I definitely have a good hand that flops very well a ton of the time. You know, King Queen offsuit. I'll take it, you know. It's not aces, but I'll take it in that spot. Ace Queen offsuit, another great hand. You know, if Gigi raises, I may consider 3-betting him because, you know, he has gotten into that big pot with Derek, and he's he like clearly was out of line there, so he probably doesn't expect me to 3-bet him too light. Because, you know, I feel like he thinks that I'm gonna come over, or he knows that, or he thinks that I think that he's gonna come over the top of me. But since it isn't him that's raising, it's Derek raising, I'm just gonna call. Again, hoping to draw this guy in. Not a great flop for me. I do have 2 overcards. I don't have any backdoor flush draws. So in a 3-way pot, out of position, I'm going to get outplayed a lot if I check call. And if I check raise, I'm expect to get called a lot too. So I think the best play here is just a check fold. I do have the best hand a lot of the time if Derek bets, but it's just impossible to play it profitably. So everyone checks. I'm just going to take a stab at it. I think Derek's checking range there can have a 7 in it or a pocket pair of some sort, but he can also be giving up a ton. If I bet here, relatively big. I feel like can represent, you know, a pair of some sort, and I do take it down. So there I had the best hand probably 100% of the time, but you know, it's just a spot where if I don't bet, I'm gonna get outplayed, and I feel like betting there is just gonna take it down a ton. So that's definitely a good result. Queen deuce off, not a good hand. Don't want to be playing queen deuce offsuit. 7-9 offsuit. It's close actually, but again, you know, this guy is. I don't know if he's gonna. This is the disadvantage of being out of position, because you don't know whether he's gonna be playing. You don't know if he's gonna want to play a hand or not. The hand that he has right now. So obviously, if I were in position here, I could do anything I want with the 7-9 offsuit. I would definitely be playing it. I could call. I could re-raise. I could do any sort of whatever. So here he 3x's. We saw him min-raise twice, and he 3x there and folded to a re-raise. So it could just mean he's just randomly choosing to mix up his bet sizing, but it could also mean that his 3x is weaker than his min-raise. Since we haven't seen a showdown yet, it's impossible to tell. If I had a better gauge for it, I might even 3-bet this 3-8 offsuit, just because it doesn't matter what hand I have. Like if he always 3x and then folds to a re-raise, and then like always min-raises and then calls a re-raise, then I can re-raise any hand I want if he 3x's. But I don't know that for sure, so I'm actually just going to fold that hand. It's just a terrible hand that I wouldn't even consider re-raising unless I had some sort of solid read. 6-8 offsuit, just going to fold. I think he's playing about 30 to 35% of his hands, which is a little more than optimal, but you know, he's not playing terrible hands. However, when he does play his hand, he does not play them well post-flop. So that's where the edge comes in. A lot of people will play way too many hands, and they won't necessarily play them that badly post-flop, but they just play way too many bad hands that, you know, they're not going to be profitable. So you really have to look out for how people are playing unprofitably and then capitalize on that. Queen 6 offsuit is a hand that I wouldn't raise against two good players in the blinds, but against him, I feel like it's definitely a raise. Again, this is a flop that I'm going to be taking it down a ton of the time. And I also, again, I don't expect bet sizing to matter too much, so I bet half the size of the pot, which I think is more than enough against him to take it down. So this is actually going to be my last orbit. I'm going to sit out when it comes to my big blind. The deep stacks and antes just usually make the game a lot more aggressive. People are fighting for the antes a lot, and you know, when you're deep, it's like you can re-raise someone and then you can 4-bet, and like if it's just 100 big blinds deep, generally after the 4-bet the person has to shove. But when it's this deep, no one really has to do any shoving. So I mean, it gets a lot more crazy and aggressive, and generally the pot sizes are going to be a lot bigger on a deep stack ante table. I feel like it's not so much the case in No Limit, even though, I mean, it is going to be bigger, but in Pot-Limit Omaha, oh my god, it'll definitely affect the play in pot sizes. Cristiano Ronaldo. I mean, like, it's, you know, he's not playing very well. He's playing very spewy. And I don't expect Gigi to fold King Jack on the turn here. I mean, this guy can have any whatever hand, and top pair there is more than good enough to get in. In this spot, it's just cooler, and he just doubled up. So, you know, I mean, sometimes they run good, and then they cooler you, and you just have to stay and take back the money, or hope someone else doesn't take the money. I think this session turned out pretty well. I think I lost somewhere around $300 on my first table. But on this table, I ended up winning about $1,200. So I pocketed a 900 profit, which is a pretty good session for a 5-10 one-table session. Again, my name is Eric Liu for Full Tilt Poker. Thank you for watching.